What is the demands of a modern day feminist?
I think the sad fact is we all have our own agenda.
Maybe it's lost some of its meaning, but feminism historically has gone through different waves.
Welcome to Bridge the Gap, a show where we aim to build a bridge of understanding between opposing views. Each episode you'll see our participants sit down to discuss some thought-provoking statements. If they disagree with the statement, they'll leave their seat and allow those that agree to explain themselves.
It takes two people to create a child.
Those that disagree then return and express themselves to the rest of the group.
Say the guy is not around when you find out you might be pregnant and he can't really have a say, like he's in another country.
Hopefully building a bridge of understanding. Let's see what happens.
Shall I go? Do you want to go?
You can go ahead.
Oh yeah, the main reason I think it's been lost is because feminism originally was about inclusivity, and now with all the argument about transphobia, started by J.K. Rowling and many other influential people, and dragging cancel culture into it, it feels like we are excluding people from what feminism is. So I think that it has lost what it originally was about.
I agree. I mean, feminism, by definition, is basically, it's pro-women's rights. It's meant to support women in a society whereby women's rights have been negated from one sense or the other by being in a patriarchal society. So feminism originated mostly from Europe. That's where it started to develop, but then it went over to the States and it became an even bigger movement, and it's just been kind of like in that circle ever since. But the reason why I think it's been lost, because if I'm talking about the actual meaning of itself and where we are in modern day society, I feel the lines have been somewhat blurred. Now, talking from a male perspective, some people have said feminism also includes the male perspective and also advocating for male equality, which I don't have a problem with. But if we're talking about feminism, we're talking about female equality if we're talking about the real definition of the word. Yeah. And because, we're in different times whereby we're trying to get equality for different things that weren't really on the topic of yesteryears. Like, for example, we're talking about men's rights now. Even though we're in a patriarchal society, there's still men at the bottom of the food chain, especially in working class culture, whereby they are subjected to things that the 10% are not going to be subjected to. If that means opportunities in job, your salary, or where you live, or the fact your neighborhood where you walk down the street and being subjected to violence or losing your life, or private healthcare. There's so many different battles going on now. If I was to talk about feminism, that's really not where the line meets it for me. I think that we should keep it female, from a female perspective on that, because that's what the word means. If it needs to be male, perhaps we need to come up with a different word to explain that.
I hear that, and to be honest with you, I probably should have gotten up, but what I will say is that I feel like the whole message behind feminism has been completely lost from the beginning, from the outset.
Right.
Feminism is about the equality of men and women, and if that's what feminism means, then I would be a feminist. However, what you find is that the branch of feminism, especially in the early days that was pushed, was for predominantly white women. Now, black feminism is another branch of feminism that isn't discussed in the media and isn't pushed as much. And to be a black woman in this society is worse than to be a black man. And it's a unique experience as well. You can't just say, we've got feminism and we've got the Black Lives Matter movement. There needs to be a black feminist movement that specifically deals with the unique experience of being a black woman. And I don't think feminism has ever really advocated for that. Obviously, you've got my G. Bell Hooks, who advocates for, black women's rights. But I think the main discourse and the main conversations around feminism are being had by white women.
Yeah, man, I disagree with you guys, man. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not hearing it. It's semantics, right? So feminism's purpose and meaning hasn't been lost, it's changed. And all things change. It's a movement, it has to grow, it has to elevate, it has to, it has to be representative and relevant to the scenario we're in. You know, that's in every single cause. The cause has to move with the momentum
My
of
argument
time.
is it's never been representative of everyone. It's never taken into account the experiences of minority women, in particular black women. It's never done that. Never.
I mean, but the question is, has the message been lost?
Okay.
I say the message was lost from the beginning, but
First of all, I want to thank you and show my appreciation for speaking about the fact that feminism isn't very inclusive of ethnic minorities, specifically black women. I feel like it's really refreshing to have a man, a black man at that, speak up in regards to the fact that it's not spoken about, so thank you. In my opinion, I feel like in order to really understand feminism is to accept that it's not a singular narrative. So like most things, it's subjective and it can have two polarized ends, one being expression and one being change. And it can change over time. What feminism might mean to me might not be what it means to you. And I feel like over time, whereas feminism was about creating political change primarily, I'm talking about the 50s, 60s, 70s, or 20th century, so forth. It was more so about, you know, being able to vote, being able to be recognized within society, within the home. Whereas now in the 21st century, a lot of women are speaking about like sexual freedom or like gender roles within the home. So I feel like there's no way you can suggest that the definition has changed. It's just that as culture grows and develops, the desires change and everyone is entitled to want different things. And just to kind of touch on what you spoke about, the Black Lives Matter movement, it's one movement, but there are so many different voices. Some people are fighting against police brutality, some people are fighting against institutional racism, so it's like, you can't say Black Lives Matter has one definition. It means something different for everyone, but we are all asking for change. And change can be the immediate desire for change. On the other end is people supporting. So I know that question hasn't been asked. Everybody is a feminist to me because one person might want change and another person might support them, and we're both kind of working towards one thing.
I hear that.
I feel like you've convinced me.
It's true. It's not black and white, you know? It's nuanced, you know? How we view our rights and how we express ourselves is different to every single person. As you said, you can't define a term for someone. And as you said, the culture changes, the movement changes, it has to grow. So yeah, maybe it's lost some of its meaning, but feminism historically has gone through different waves. As you mentioned, you know, legal rights was the first wave. Then there was, you know, economic rights. Then there was gender roles, and it's progression. And now we're in a wave now where we're looking at, right, okay, we're in the third, fourth wave. Let's review our failures of the previous waves and do them right this time around.
Yeah, but my argument is that when we're talking about the fourth wave, the goal of it is a bit sort of convoluted in the sense that what are the demands of what is the demands of a modern day feminist? And when you even look at some of the demands, they are not taking into account the experiences of black women. I'm trying to say, okay, cool, we enjoy many political freedoms in the UK, women can vote, but what about in other countries where women don't have the right to vote? In Saudi Arabia, it was literally just, 2 years ago that women were allowed to drive? You know, why can't feminists in this country be arguing for women's rights globally?
I feel like, essentially, in my opinion, it just reflects the environment you're in.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I'm not saying that if a petition comes to support or help people who can't vote, I won't sign for it. But that's not my reality, so that's not my main fight. I can only fight my own battles. I can't fight everyone's battles. So it's very important for all women to speak up. And equally, like I said, it's about change and support. So even if you don't feel like there's an area where you can actively change.
I was just going to ask you, like, from your experiences working in the like corporate world or wherever you work, have you felt like your you know, white women colleagues support you in terms of like pushing for, you know, black female rights? I'm trying to say, because obviously your struggle is unique and probably more deep-rooted than her struggle. Do you feel like she's been an ally to you in that sense? Do you feel like you have many white allies as a black feminist?
I like to push narratives. I like to ask questions. So if you're asking me specifically, I'm somebody who goes into a place and I want to educate, I want to empower, and I also want to learn. So if I'm having a general conversation about I'm sure a lot of black women or women of colour can relate, my hair. Oh my gosh, is that your real hair? Yesterday I had short hair and today I have dreadlocks. It's not my hair. You're not trying to be, you're not trying to insult me by any means, but you're just trying to understand where I come from. And I feel like it's very easy to be offended and become defensive rather than engage in a conversation that allows two people to understand each other and then form a relationship that allows you to become supportive of each other within the workplace. The next time another person has a conversation about my hair, I might not even have to speak up. Feminists do not all have the same agenda.
I'm half getting up, I'm half sitting down. I'm
Same.
like, I think this, right? I think feminists have a common goal, I'd like to say. You know, there's a general consensus. But as we've mentioned in the previous topic, everyone has things that represent their own struggles and their lifestyles. So maybe their core goal for having a more equitable society is equal, but how they go about pursuing it, or the individual things that they want to improve in their lives, probably is different. And that's fine.
I always like to look at things in a way whereby if me and you are having a conversation and we're both thinking the same thing, millions of other people in the world are going to think the same thing. I mean, there's billions of us. So statistically, there has to be more people thinking the same thing. And in that same sense, when you're dealing with feminism and you're dealing with the fact that people will have their own political agendas, it makes sense. There are going to be people that are somewhat monopolies, I guess, in the feminist movement, i.e. they know a lot more than the layman. So apart from the fact that they understand we need equity, we need equality, they understand the systems of power, which the layman may not. And in doing so, they understand how to maneuver in those circles, and that by creating allyship and creating camaraderie with other people that might identify with the same struggles, they're able to push to pinnacles of power where they might find themselves in better positions to push something that they may be more for as opposed not to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with the statement because, like I've said before, the big umbrella is freedom. The expressions vary. Some women want freedom at home, some people want freedom within culture, some women want freedom in the workplace. Some women, as human beings, we all want freedom in a certain capacity, and it's just subjective to each individual, so yeah. I agree.
I think the sad fact is we all have our own agenda, because even if you're a feminist, like you could be a white Republican feminist or super supports Trump. Unfortunately, they probably do exist. Or you could be a black Republican who supports Trump and is also a feminist. So I think, unfortunately, because of other political divides, we all have our own agenda when we join a movement. I feel like movements today are great. Like I think Black Lives Matter, which I can't speak about very much because I don't know them that much. But I think that movement has got such a ring of everyone knows why they're doing it. At least people who educate themselves know why and what the main purpose is. There isn't much drama around it. Feminism, however, with all this transphobia argument, I feel like that's wasting the time when they could advocate for minorities. They instead need to talk about how they don't want trans people. Now, that may be a valid point, but I think it's because feminism has been like so discolored by all these like really random areas. And when we should be talking about like rape and sexual assault and violence against minorities, instead we're talking about transphobia.
On that note, I'm glad you brought that up because in this time where we're talking about the Black Lives Movement and we're talking about the fact that this is more of a revolution than anything else, I think it's really important that people of differing ethnicities and cultures aren't trying to get it right. They need to have that conversation, as you were saying, because I mean, even corporates who are trying to, okay, let's say bandwagon on the feministic type movement, they say, oh, we want to get ahead of it. Oh, we want to get it right. If you're trying to get it right, you're still hiding those pieces of wrong information that you have in your brain because you're afraid to fess up to the fact you might be a contributor to this problem, and that instead of educating yourself, you think you can just hide behind the guise of, oh, we just want to get it right. Like this is a test. Like feminism, equality is not a test. Like you're saying, things are subjective at the end of the day. And if someone has a bad point, a bad perspective, it doesn't make them a bad person. It might just be that they've not yet understood their privilege in the situation. So things that they're saying actually sound worse than they should be.
Yeah, so my whole perspective is, the question was, do all feminists have the same agenda or same narrative? And what's interesting is I think all the feminists with significant influences of power to actually create change all have the same narrative and all have the same agenda. Because if they didn't, we would see real change. Now, a lot of the women or so-called feminists that have power, i.e. Margaret Thatcher, Theresa May, what have they actually done to improve the lives of women? Absolutely nothing. Now, the MPs in Parliament, they actually have significant political power. What have they done to actually improve the lives of women? That's the question you have to ask. And if we're still saying today that society is, grossly unfair and very misogynistic and very patriarchal, then the people we need to be holding to account are our politicians and the people that can influence our society. And at the end of the day, if society is still the same, then obviously they have the same agenda, and obviously this is the agenda that they want. This status quo that we're living in is exactly what the feminists, the so-called feminists that sit at the decision-making table want. This is the equality they want, and this is the equality they're content with, and that's just facts.
I agree with you, but I've got a slight counter-argument, which is there's not enough representation. If I am Margaret Thatcher and I'm in a position to be able to implement change and I'm sitting in a room full of men, what happens next? I can have narratives, but essentially I need to get the support of the people in the room to be able to actually implement that change. So I definitely agree with what you're saying, but I definitely feel like women's voices, we're not there yet.
I hear that, but I think one of the things that's problematic in our society is we get so caught up in something called symbolism, right? So Obama was held up as this, great savior of the black community in America, and the black community in America got so hung up on symbolism, they failed to hold him to account when he was president for 8 years. And as a result, the black community in America have actually regressed. Even if we do have women in power, they're not always going to advocate or push for feminism. And that's not even because there's not enough feminists at the table. It may just be because it doesn't align with their own political objectives. What you need to understand about the gender pay gap, and I think this is a misconception, right? A woman, like in this country, a woman and a man doing the same job gets paid the same amount. They're working for the same company. It's illegal not to give a woman the same amount of money for the work the man's doing.
That ain't true.
No, it is illegal. What tends to happen, what the gender pay gap actually is the average lifetime earnings of a woman compared to a man. Do you know what I'm trying to say? That's literally what the gender pay gap means. A lot of people think it means, oh, you're doing the same job, you're both working, I don't know, let's say at McDonald's, and they're paying you 50p less. That's not what it means. It means over your lifetime, what is a man likely to earn versus what is a woman likely to earn. And in this country, just to put it out there, for every pound earned by a man, a woman earns 83p. So that's the difference. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, gender pay gap now is like 8.9%, so it's improving, but like 8.9% if you earn £1 million is a lot of money. Do you know what I mean? Over your lifespan. If you do the maths, you have to look at that.
No, it's still significant.
It's crazy.
But then what you have to also understand is because it's a look at their average lifetime earnings, right? You need to take into account the fact that a woman might want to start a family. I'm trying to say 9 times out of 10, what tends to happen is the woman will take a break from her career to look after the kids and then go back into her career. That can significantly impact her wages. And I think the job of government is to make it more convenient for women to stay in their jobs while raising a family.
I agree.
By providing stuff like free childcare. You know what I'm trying to say? Women should be able to keep their jobs while having kids. They shouldn't have to necessarily sacrifice their career because they have kids, and that's the problem.
I was just going to say, on top of that, I think there also needs to be this propelled idea, more so, that there's a male responsibility in terms of looking after the child. I mean, last place I worked at, I think they had like paternity leave for males. I think it was just like a week or 2 or something like that. But the point is, there's a sense of responsibility in that capacity that, there is maternity leave for a male. You can stay at home for X amount of time and actually look after your children, and at the same time putting less of the burden on the female as if she must assume this role because she birthed this child. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I agree. Moving back towards the question, I guess, I do think there are other factors that have contributed to the gender pay gap, and I feel like culture is a big one. I think we misappropriate women's ability to do jobs, so therefore they're not paid enough. And for whatever reason, looking at boardrooms, I think it's something ridiculous, like top 50 companies, 7 out of 100 have male CEOs. That's crazy. We misappropriate how much ability females have to do a good job in positions of power. I think women are stigmatized as not strategic when it comes to making board level decisions. I think we deem women to not be ruthless, and we see being ruthless and cutthroat as a strength in business. And apparently in society, women aren't seen as people that possess that skill set. And therefore the culture shifts that issue as well, I think.
It's facts. I mean, going off the example of the female MPs around the world, during this COVID debacle, it was the females that held it down in their country.
Yeah.
You know, they were able to manage their
the
countries.
female leaders, sorry.
Yeah, they were able
PMs,
to manage
PMs,
their countries more effectively, and they were able to reduce the amount of COVID incidences. I will say that in some capacity, if, let's say, a female gets to a position that she's been dreaming of, it's a dream position, and loads of males are running for it, but they got, you know, kicked off the boat, and she's just grateful to be in that position. Sometimes, I'm not saying I'm speaking for all women, but I've seen the mentalities, they forget to negotiate their salary, because it's the idea of you're where you are, you should be grateful, you shouldn't ask more than this. But if it's a male, they'll come into that room, their briefcase, they'll be like, right.
Yeah. No,
How much?
Yeah.
So like, we're saying, okay, we'll pay you 150K. It's like, nah.
Not quite.
Nah, exactly, not quite. How about 200K? You know what I mean? They discussed it, but again, it goes back to Jamal's point about the environment and the culture, and the society that we live in, whereby it's almost, males are praised for having that assertive confidence, dominating factor. If a female does that, they're either called aggressive, or they're said to be,
she's
you know,
divisive.
outspoken. Exactly. Or,
Especially when they're a black woman.
or like, or excuse my French, they call them the BITCH. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that word, but you know what I'm saying?
Men should have a say on abortion.
Oh God.
Why would you do that?
Cool, like,
Wait, I don't know. I'll just play devil's advocate.
Dave Chappelle now. We're all gonna be in it now.
I'm gonna sit down.
I'm gonna stay out.
Okay, so I agree that men should have a voice when it comes to abortions. I'm going to speak about it in a context of two people having unprotected sex. As much as it is your body and you're going to carry the child, I feel like sometimes, this is such a sensitive topic, I don't want to offend anyone, but I just feel like sometimes we dismiss and don't really allow men to have an opinion on the fact that they might want a child, or, you know, it takes two people to create a child, so I don't know.
isn't it? It's a bit.
Yeah, no, my stance on it is I think, you know, the father of the child should always be part of the discussion, but obviously the final decision isn't his. It should obviously lie with the woman, but I would find it deeply concerning and deeply problematic if someone was pregnant with my child and didn't tell me. And didn't allow me to sort of give my opinion and have a say in what's happening to the child. Obviously, ultimately, I can't force a woman to make the decision either way, but I think men should be allowed to express whether they're going to keep the child and want to look after it,
Controversial,
whether they want. Yeah.
It's a difficult topic. I think that, like, making a child is a joint enterprise. So to exclude me from that, even just to have an opinion, for me is an issue. I'm going to say the final decision is the woman's, it is her that has to bear it, you know? But I do think men should have a say. Why would you want to know, you know?
Even presenting the argument of the fact that I might not be able to provide for you, I can't be there, or I don't want a child, like, have those conversations, because there are too many stories where women make the decision to either keep or to abort, and then you end up waking up and it's like, do you know what, I actually do need extra help, and it's like, if you had a conversation with him, you would have known whether or not you were going to get that or you weren't going to get that. It just allows you to make it more...
9 times out of 10, if a woman's pregnant with my kid,
What's the one time?
I'll say 10 out of 10 times, I'm going to tell her to keep it. But I just think, you know, ultimately, right, when you look at sort of single parent households, men can just do a run out and forget about the child. So if the woman knows you, she might know that there's no point of even telling you, because there's only one answer you're going to give. See what I'm trying to say? So I think we do need to be sensitive with it, but I do think that, like, I agree with what you're saying in a sense. A man should express some sort of view. We should at least hear what he has to say.
Yeah, so you're prepared.
Yeah, exactly. Well, guys can chat shit.
It's true.
You want to go first?
Should I start? Oh yeah. Okay. I think it's such a nuanced issue, and normally I would say, yeah, men have a right to have an opinion. But sadly, that isn't always, the circumstances don't always allow that to happen. Say the guy is not around when you find out you might be pregnant and he can't really have a say, like he's in another country or he's not able to be there. And it's like because it's a very time sensitive thing. So I feel like, and then also the fact that women can be, who are quite young, who may get accidentally pregnant, can be swayed by like cultural influences and family and also their boyfriend or partner. It's just one more thing for women to deal with. That's why I feel like, even though I have many things about feminism I disagree with, this is the bodily autonomy part is what I do agree with, because it's just so dangerous to affect that. Otherwise, because it's such an unfair issue in itself that women have to sort of make that decision sometimes, that unfortunately making men also part of it just makes it even more likely to have problems, but that could just be me being pessimistic, but yeah, that's it.
I think because the question to me sounds as if the idea of pregnancy is housed in a situation whereby it's normatic in the terms that it's a social situation we've all either heard of, maybe some people have experienced. It's something that's not completely off the cuff. Now, in issues, for example, when it's rape that's concerned, and the female is the protagonist in that story, from my perspective, I don't see where the male's argument comes in.
No,
Do you understand what I'm saying?
That's completely reasonable.
Yeah.
That's completely reasonable, yeah.
Well, exactly. So, and number two, I think, especially in light of current topics, depending on your ethnicity, medicine has failed women in some instances. And sometimes pregnancy, although the mortality rate, it's different to where it was 10, 20 years ago, it's still pretty much a big health risk and it's a big physical strain on a woman's body to give birth, especially speaking, for example, in the context of black people within medicine. It's not something, black people are not really the focus of things like in pregnancy, because usually the paradigm example is of a white woman and how it would affect a white woman when they're giving birth. They don't really explain some of the complications that come into it when you're a black woman, in terms of your hormones, in terms of hypertension, in terms of you dying during childbirth. Like the mortality rates differ with ethnicities. That's something that's not really talked about. And although I'm going to say from a male perspective, like, or let's say it's going to be a boy, or I'm going to have a son, like, why are you going to deny me a son? Do you know what I mean? And for some people, the ego comes into it, and you're not really thinking about the safety of the woman. And I think it goes back to what you're saying. At the end of the day, the woman's going to make the final decision. But I think in instances where it's medical, in terms of unforeseen circumstances where it's not the social norm, for example, rape, I feel like females should have absolute autonomy in those situations, just because it's directly impacting them and impacting their body and their life.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, it's like you both rightly said, in situations like rape, and also when the guy's not around, of course, the decision lies with the woman. But I think just in a sort of normal situation, even if, it was maybe a one-night stand or you're in a relationship with the person, I think not telling the guy that, you're having a kid with him can sort of sow the seeds of distrust. Right? Imagine finding out, with the person you're with 5-10 years later that they had a child and aborted it without your knowledge. Yeah, I mean, what kind of,
it's a bit mad. It's a bit mad.
You might have even supported her decision not to have the child, but the fact she didn't tell you.
Yeah, excluded from the conversation.
Is a
I'm
mad
heavy
thing.
on having conversations. You could even feel like, I'm not ready because A, B, C, and D, and it's like, actually, no, I got. Primarily, like, I speak about financially because it takes a lot of money to raise a child. So you might feel like, I'm not ready to have a child because
the child is a mortgage.
It's a mortgage.
More than that.
You might feel like, do you know what? What if I say that I'm going to do A, B, C, and D, and then you're almost like convinced, not in like you're being forced, but your narrative and perspective has changed. Your main issue for not wanting to have the child was financially, and I'm not saying you're going to rely on that man to provide for you, but he's shown you that there is a way, like, we can make this work. So I just feel like the conversation is important. Equality can be achieved without feminism.
Wait, no, I do agree.
Oh, okay, I'm not alone. All right.
You were looking at
I was gonna say, like, I don't mind. Like, I'm for myself, I have to. The fundamental goal of feminism is equality. So for me, they're one of the same. So if you believe in equality, you believe in feminism. And if you achieve equality, indirectly you're going to achieve feminism, because that's the whole purpose of equality. Feminism for me is obviously, you know, ideology that's based on equality, but they've got their own different faculties and their own different views and how they want to pursue that. And I think if you attack the problem at the core, all the sort of smaller issues get solved anyway.
Yeah.
Because most of the world's issues are around equality, full stop.
Yeah.
If you solve that equality, feminism indirectly is going to be solved.
Exactly. It sounds horrible to rank equality.
Yeah, how
but
doing that?
let's just say the main lack of, let's say, racism. Like, can that be solved without feminism? Possibly, yeah, because it would touch feminism. That's why I agree with the statement. But like, I mean, there are so many different facets in feminism. Also, I have the issue that feminism can obscure the real purpose of equality. So maybe if we don't call it feminism, we can have equality. Sadly, that might be.
I agree with you, and this is the thing that a lot of change agendas, sometimes we get lost in like the pain of whatever you're suffering because of your cause, that you end up isolating people even more.
Unfortunately.
And the whole point of the equality search is to be more equal, right?
Yep.
It's to bring people together and more inclusion. And indirectly, sometimes when you're so impassioned about something and you're so led by the closure you've not yet received, you actually distance yourself from people. So if we can...
This is happening so much
you see
these
what I'm
days.
saying? If we can solve the first goal of equality, most of the agendas get solved anyway.
Exactly,
So.
yeah. Like, you know, this radical feminism, and I think, yeah, that is a thing. And people saying that maybe if you're a radical feminist and you're of an ethnic minority, but do we call people who hate racism radical against racism? No, it's only feminism that has to categorize.
Yeah.
So maybe feminism is just hindering the equality a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to be devil's advocate because
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
feminism is good, but there are issues with it. So yeah, agree with you.
Yeah. Pros and cons. Pros and cons. Say that again? Play it on. Oh, okay, yeah. Talk to us, guys.
No, I think I just want to kick it off by saying, cool, I think, you know, feminism in of itself, like the movement so far has already inspired and sparked other movements, i.e. black feminism. So regardless of whether we achieve a more equitable, more equal society, feminism has already played a huge role. Without feminism, we wouldn't have the, you know, sort of political freedoms that women rightfully deserve right now. And when you look at sort of countries in the developing world, feminism is still a huge force for them. There, you might sort of come to the conclusion that feminism has run its course in sort of the 21st century and in modern developed countries, but I still think there's a lot that feminism can offer, in particular black feminism. I think that hasn't really reached its full potential yet. So of course feminism isn't the only thing that's going to lead to equality, but I still think it has a lot to contribute to that sort of discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I disagree because I don't believe in singular narratives. I feel like you're asking whether or not you can achieve change by just having one voice, and I don't think you can.
I think my perspective is that, I think going off what you were saying, is that the term feminism, when it was first, during its inception, really just raised a question regarding, you know, inequality in our society, be that whether that was, you know, started off with females and then, you know, became much more multifaceted. I think where we are now, we're answering questions on a different level than we were before. And I think it also goes into what you're saying about the grades of equality, but I think in terms of going into whether you're black, you're Asian, Arab, whichever, you know, we're starting to talk and have much more different conversations about what equality looks like in those circumstances. Feminism, I think, is necessary in its ism because it's a battle cry, one, to explain that we are fighting a war on this front and we are fighting a war on equality within our society or societies, but also at the same time, before I lose my train of thought, this issue is bigger than one person. I think going back to what you're saying, and I think equality is something that it's an ideal and it's something that we want to achieve, but it's so much bigger than all of us. I think isms is a way of calling upon allies in situations whereby those are too disenfranchised to get their voices heard in the areas they should be, even though they understand the powers at play. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think it's very important to still have that.
Yeah.